without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jay and Janet to briefly introduce themselves and we'll get going. Janet, go ahead.
Yes. Mara, can you put the first slide up for me, please?
Oh, you want the slides already?
Yeah, line it up already.
I thought you were going to introduce yourself first. All right, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Okay, here you go. How's that?
Right. So I would like to thank you guys for joining us today. Jay and I will be going over our presentation, which includes emerging adulthood and the effects of incarceration. So if you're a Goucher student, you pretty much know that Jay and I go by the twins. We were both graduates of the class of 2023. We received our bachelor's in American Studies with honors. That was a really great experience, and that was one of the introductions between the two of us. So Goucher recently went through a phase of enhancing our community here to be in alignment with its Towson campus. That brought on more activities and more programs for us to participate in. But everywhere I turned around, there was Jay just copying off of me. So I'm twin one and he's twin two. But I'll let Jay take on the next slide. Next slide, Marlon. Thank you.
So it's my honor to introduce a Goucher Fellow, a mentor, a youth advocate, a member of the Student Voice Council, a certified trauma facilitator, a life coach, a poet, a social scientist, an extraordinary scholar, Janet Johnson.
That's me, twin one. And Jay is twin two. So I would love to let you guys know that he is a facilitator's facilitator. That is really a thing. He's an awesome youth mentor. He's smart recovery certified. He's a historian in his own right, but I love him in a role as a higher education visionary. So it's my pleasure to share my twin with you guys today. Next slide, Mara. Thank you.
So our presentation started as our theses that we each wrote. And so Janet's thesis was about emerging adulthood. And the question that was posed for Janice was, have cultural norms shifted to signify 18 is no longer the maker at which adolescents transition into adulthood? The second question the answer was, what does this mean for emerging adults within the Maryland criminal justice system? For me, my senior thesis was on functional therapies and whether or not cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, and transitional therapy could be used as functional treatment options for two syndromes that I found, which is post-incarceration syndrome and post-incarceration transition syndrome. And so what the thesis is a longer project that allowed us to study, look at, and try to find answers for issues that was close to our heart. Next slide, please. And so as we go through, one of the things that we want y'all to keep in mind is this definition of health, a state of overall well-being and vigor through the mind, body, and spirit, which allows the agency for oneself. Keep this in mind as we present look at what's a norm, like what are we trying to say and what are we trying to lead you to understand about exactly what we speaking about. Next slide, please.
So for my thesis, I hit on emerging adulthood. So I had a question, what was an emerging adult? I kept hearing a term be thrown around. I didn't fit the age category for a juvenile, which was anyone under the age of 18. I was being considered an adult, but then I also started hearing like, no, because your brain isn't developed. So an emerging adult is an adolescent between the ages of 18 and 25. It is a sensitive time period where your brain goes through different phases of growth. You have the plasticity of networks linking brain regions that actually grow. And then plasticity, when you think of it, it's just the alteration of neural pathways. So this sensitive time frame, emerging adulthood, is where the brain rewires itself, starting from the onset of puberty up to 24. That's really important when we look at the criminal justice system, because if our brain isn't quite developed to the stage of an adult, how can you leave us with adult, I want to say, culpability, to where as though we are expected to own up to what we did, but take responsibility for some things we don't really fully understand. When in Jay's thesis, he hits picks and pits. Mara, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So PICS is post-incarceration syndrome. Is a set of symptoms that are present in many currently incarcerated and recently released community members that are caused by prolonged incarceration in environments of punishment. That's a key environment of punishment. I want you to remember that. And then PITS is post-incarceration transition syndrome, an undiagnosed mental illness that is believed African American males have that produces a history of criminality and incarceration. Now, I know a lot of you ladies out there are looking crazy because it says males. So I'm gonna let Jay handle that because that was his thesis and see if y'all feel how I feel.
Next slide, please. So one of the things about Pitts was done by Dr. Max Ragland, and it was done and designed to address the reality that he felt as an African American male and what he's seen in this environment. But when you step back and look at it, it's non-exclusive, right? Because the same things that happen to African American men happen to African American women, and it's also found within other groups of people. It was just Pitts was designed as a philosophy, as an idea to address and speak about symptoms and issues that's found directly within the African American community. Because one of the things we find is African Americans tend to suffer longer sentences and higher rates of incarceration throughout this nation, right? And when you look at prisons themselves were designed, as I've always been taught in school, by the Quakers, so that as a person go there, they could show repentance and they could get themselves together and grow. It was a scholar when I was doing my research named Dean Champion, and he stated that prisons had an earlier root in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, and it was where they threw their political descendants and people that disagreed with the way that the actual society was being governed. And this was back in the 7th century BCE. After that, he said prisons didn't become widely used until the 15th century. And in the 15th century, prisons became more of a way of social control, right? But looking at prisons as a way of social control and everything that happens in prisons, one of the things that we have to do, we have to rethink the way that we incarcerate, and we have to start thinking about exactly what happens in prison and the damage and the trauma that's left on people within prison. Next slide.
So in order for us to really understand the damage that comes along with incarceration, we have to understand how to bring functions and how it develops to an extent. So if you look at this photo of the brain, the entire brain sections, the emotional part of your brain, is actually the limbic system. And that governs anything from fear-based instincts, emotional memory, defensive behavior, aggression. It really just drives your emotion. And if you look at the little section titled prefrontal cortex, that actually governs your behavior control, judgment, inhibition of behavior, and self-monitoring. It drives sound judgment and impulse control. That section is actually very, very small. And when it comes to development, the mismatch in development that is detrimental to one's growth is a 10-year period. So you have your emotional brain developing during puberty and your early teens, and then your prefrontal cortex doesn't mature until about 25. It's important because when you look at teens has less white matter, and the white matter is also known as myelin, is in the frontal lobes, and compared to adults, the teens' myelin and the frontal lobes increases throughout adolescence. So with more myelin comes more growth of important neural circuitry, and it allows for better flow of information between each region of the brain. So in addition to that, you have pruning that happens. So pruning is just basically when the brain get rid of maladaptive brain cells that don't function, brain cells that are just off. So that's necessary for you to actually become a complete adult. And this is why it's important to recognize emergent adulthood and not just classify you as a young adult. Next slide, please, Mara.
So one of the things that we find when we talking about emerging adulthood, we talking about a stage of adolescence, and we understand, we looking at the decision making and understanding the consequence. And these are two things that we find lacking within children, within that new group of emerging adults, right? And we want to make sure we distinguish emerging adults from juveniles and to distinguish them from adults, because it's a phase in your life where your decision-making process is actually damaged, and your ability to look long-term at the consequences of your actions doesn't really exist. So this is a space where a person is moving through the necessary growth of life, but yet they still can't understand and fully comprehend the reality and the long-term decisions, the long-term effects of the decisions they make. Next slide, please.
So when we look at emerging adulthood and the criminal justice system, for juveniles, juveniles will be held accountable for what they do, but it's called criminally responsible. Whereas emerging adult or an adult is held fully culpable. That means that there's less leniency when it comes to your sentencing or acceptance of mitigating factors, because it is assumed an emerging adult understands and are in control of most things that adults are just developmentally not. They're lacking. So how can you look at me as an emerging adult whose brain hasn't developed as a full adult, capable of defending myself, understanding the laws, knowing when my laws are violated, when they aren't violated, understanding consequences in general, because it doesn't work like that. It is impossible for me to do so as an emerging adult coming into the criminal justice system. So I'm gonna let Jay tell you a little bit about the arbitrary age of majority.
So when you're looking at the arbitrary age of majority, one of the things that we find is when you turn 18, they say that you fully could comprehend the consequences of your actions. Yet at 18, you're not trusted civilly, right? But you held criminally responsible for everything that you do to the fullest extent of the law. Like at the age of 18, you can't have a credit card. At the age of 18, you can't rent a car. But at the age of 18, you could get a life sentence, right? You can't buy alcohol, you can't buy tobacco. Like, so when we looking at the age of majority, we looking at what does this really mean? Because here it is, criminally, you're always held responsible for what you do. Even though we recognize that you can't have a pack of cigarettes, even though we recognize that you can't drink an alcoholic beverage. So it's a hypocrisy here, right? And we want to point that out because in order for us to change, we got to know what's wrong. Next slide, please.
Mara, hold on. Don't next slide yet. I want to say one quick thing to add on what Jay was saying. I want you guys to really understand, right? Because I used this analogy yesterday when explaining this to my team. You can stay on your parents' health care until the age of 25. So that means from a civil stand, right? We're being nurtured and coddled into adulthood. But when it comes to criminality, we are not given the same grace. And there's no reason to separate the distinction. So I know, like, there's mothers out there, there's fathers out there that understand the nurturing that they need to pour into their child. We need to push the issue to have that same grace, that same nurturing pushed over to the criminal aspect, the criminality of the legal system as well. So that's all I wanted to add. You could go to the next slide. Thank you, Twin. Thank you so much.
So one of the things that I found when I was studying Pitts was the criminal institutionalization process. And this was the process where the individual was actually groomed into the mentality, into the behaviors of criminality. And being groomed into the mentalities and behaviors of criminality, one of the things that happen is you look at a child within an environment, they have been taught and being groomed to look at the world a certain type of way. And with them being looking at the world that type of way, then they're going to respond to it based upon what they understand and what they see. And so when you have a child being taught, in essence, to live outside the system, every decision they make is going to be for them to be outside the system.
Yeah, and the dual modality come into play because you got to think about it. The research is saying is Pitts derives in men that are gonna end up in an institution, right? However, it starts with the household they come from. It's still inclusive to the mothers. It's still inclusive to the entire family. We're conditioned to believe that we don't fit in certain pockets of society. So then we have to fight and claw our way to get what's rightfully ours. So we know that sometimes we don't do everything the legal route as in which we're supposed to. But that again, that's things that we learn, that's inherited generationally. We gotta break that because Pitts is actually groomed into our identity. That's all.
And so as we begin to looking at the identity, as it's being groomed into who we are, these are the decisions we make. Carter G. Woodson said, when you deprave a man enough, you no longer have to, when you capture his mind in such a way, you no longer have to tell him to take the back door, he'll automatically take it. And if it's not one there, he'll make one so that he can take the back door. So this is the same thing that happens within this criminal institutionalization process. Even when we find times where we shouldn't take the back door, even when we find times where a back door doesn't exist, we make one. We find a way to make one, and then we still take that back door because this becomes so central to the identity of who we are. Next slide, please. And so this would lead to these root symptoms that I found that exist within pits and pits. Once we find ourselves within these concentration camps, one of the things that we find, we all suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. We suffer from anxiety. We suffer from sleeplessness because the reality is now that we are removed from a part of our lifestyle, right? Because we still been groomed to be able to survive in prison and the environment we find ourselves in, but we remove from a part of our lifestyle and put with ourselves. So we usually don't have the same numbing tools that we usually use to get rid of the symptoms that seen from post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And being as though we don't have these things to use to numb it, then we have to go through it. Then we have to begin to face ourselves. And if we're not strong enough to face ourselves, then it comes out in different manners that's normalized within a prison environment. And so this leads to institutionalized personality traits. And one of the things that we find about institutionalized personality traits is while we in the institution, we tend to live according to the structure of the institution. Like we need the institution to structure our lives because we couldn't. And the moments that we got freedom, the moments that we got the little bit of ability within the institution to do our own thing, we don't know what to do because we so used to the institution telling us what to do. So as a incarcerated community member, once we return to society, then we keep that same thing going. We keep living and moving like we still and captured within the institution. So it means that when we hungry, we wait for somebody else tell us to eat. We might get in the shower with our clothes on. The responses that we have here of questioning the trust and stuff like that of people, it carries on out there. And then it continues that incarceration process. So though we free, we still incarcerated.
And then in addition to being institutionalized, right, we often acquire the antisocial personality traits. It might look like we're being standoffish or we're socially awkward, when in reality, we had to isolate ourselves in an environment for so long that forced us to create these mannerisms that are kind of defensive. So for me, I'm going to use me as an example. Me isolating myself and just trying to do the correct thing in an environment that's not built for me to be successful, I wound up having social sensory deprivation syndrome. My social cues are completely off. I have a good family support. I have nieces and nephews and two sisters my age, so I'm not missing on the trends. I'm just missing out on like how to socialize with people that aren't just as impacted. I don't know if you're flirting. I don't know if you're feeling some type of way because I have inherently just been antisocial. So that's something I'm working on, but that's something we find prevalent in people returning back to their communities, even people that are still currently incarcerated.
And so one of the things that we find when we're looking at not being able to understand the social cues and so forth, we begin to look for ways that we used to use to deal with the newfound stresses and anxiety. So many people turn back to reactive substance use disorder. And what this means is that we begin to self-medicate, and we begin to self-medicate without even looking for tomorrow, because in self-medicating, we want to alleviate ourselves of the stresses of the things that we're going through and create an environment where we're comfortable, whether it's for 5 minutes, whether it's for 5 hours. It's all about getting rid of and getting past the actual social stigmas and the actual pain and anxiety that exists. Next slide, please.
Okay, so here's a quote that Twin introduced to me, and I really love it. It says, "We do not brutalize the environment, we are brutalized by the environment." that is really important for people who may not understand incarceration, may not really be able to fathom the effects of incarceration. But every time we read this, I always tell Twin, like, but we have the power to change that environment. I'm in here. I know my peers. I know the other students that I'm with, the other people that live in the dorm with me. We're powerful enough to change the environment. It's not easy, but we need collaboration to do so. We have to come up with solutions that we can understand to do so. And in doing so, we gotta remain healthy. Next slide, Maura, please. I want to take you back to our definition of healthy is a state of overall well-being and vigor throughout the mind, body, and on spirit, which allows agency for oneself. It's that agency that's going to get us to shift our environment, to make our environment work for us, because this is supposed to be a place of rehabilitation. We have to scrap and fight with the same tenacity we did outside, inside, to become fully healthy and fully just successful. And it's up to us. So, next slide, please.
And so one of the things that we wanted to do is we hate presenting problems without presenting solutions also. For too often and too long, we always hear about what's wrong and not about what we're doing to fix it. So one of the solutions that we offer is program reinvestment and reentry. One of the reasons that we picked program investment and reentry was because once you enter prison, reentry starts, right? The moment that you walk through these doors, reentry has to start. And so when we're looking at the programs that's alive within the institutions, they can begin to start that healing process to begin to combat the different symptoms and stuff that's present within these environments that allows a person to be even more likely to succeed once released. Because we got to remember, one of the things is about getting to healthy, staying healthy, and then returning back to the community as informally incarcerated community members in a healthy and progressive state.
Yeah, so how do we do that? Personally, I think it takes a continuum of care programs. So while we was doing research, I found this program in Ohio. It's called the Returning Home Ohio program. So it's a program where Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections and their Corporation for Supportive Housing, they collaborate in order to support services for returning citizens, but they give them permanent housing coming out the door. So it's not like you're going to transitional housing, right? They set you up with everything you need coming out of prison, and they collaborate with agencies across the state. I think that's pretty dope. I think that's what we need. Don't wait until you're out there to try to set you up for success. Success looks very different depending upon the person. So I think more collaboration is needed. And when I say more collaboration, another form of collaboration I would love to see is when criminal institutions and programs partner with citizens living the experience, as well as citizens who are, have lived experience of incarceration, to evaluate existing policies, existing programs, and also to develop new things, because we know what works. We know what's working. We know what worked in the past. I think you have to really bridge that gap. Many states, they have lived experience, I want to say boards. I was talking to one of my peers and she was like, we need a living experience committee. And she's absolutely right. We know what works for us. We know what we need better than anybody else. Another thing, Jay, you want to hit the mentors?
Yeah, so another thing, like you say, the person closest to the issue always knows how to best to solve it. So when you look at actual mentors, when you look at the current state of affairs within most prisons, you tend to find programs that have mentors and facilitators that take the time out of their day to actually build the people up and build the prison up around them, right? So particularly on both of our locations, you find that AVP exists. And what AVP does, it allows people to come in there as you are and give you a transformative set of ideas to then begin to challenge your reality and move forward. You find youth programs like Youth Journey, Youth Challenge, who then begin to take in the juveniles and the young people that come in through the doors and give them somebody that they work with on a day-to-day basis to push them forward to ensure that the damage that's been done to us that don't get repeated, right? To make sure that they don't have to build the first step and go through the same things that we went through in the beginning of our incarceration, so that they could then build the next step, right? So that the next group of people will have something different, something more powerful and invigorating, so that they can push forward and change their reality and reshape the way they look at the world.
Yeah, so as you can see, we have legislation on the slide as well. More recently, October the 1st, Maryland put in effect its Second Look Act. The Second Look Act allows for emerging adults who have served 20 years or more to come in front of a judge and petition the court for early release. However, more states need to look at their legislation as well. In order for us to build up the forgotten population of emerging adults, you have to really be able to provide them the tools necessary. We cannot give them tools if we don't recognize that they exist, right? The state can no longer, each state can no longer hold a dichotomy. It has to be diverse. You can't say you have juveniles and you have adults. So the legislation actually acknowledge emerging adults, but also give them a resource. It allows for them a meaningful chance at release. And I think that's really, really important. I know DC has done some legislation work. Vermont, there's a few states out there that actually led the initiative. And I just hope that you guys learned a few things and can pick it up and run with it.
Right. So looking at that, one of the key things is, like, man, not all of us got agency. We got the ability to do the change legislation and push the narrative forward, right? Because at the end of the day, it's on us. It's on us that's incarcerated to change our reality and live a different way, and then begin to back people and push legislation because we closer to the problem. It's on people that's impacted by our incarceration to begin to look at and hold their delegates to a higher level, because we need legislation with teeth that can actually give emerging adults hope at a better future, hope at a release, and so forth. Because one of the things that we find is, again, legislation is changing, but all legislation doesn't have the necessary teeth to force emerging adults a second chance, a second look, and a new space within society.
And they don't, and I would like to add, is networking is key. And when he said teeth, I know you guys say me laugh because we're building every time we meet. And this is the discussion we just had. Whereas Maryland's Juvenile Restoration Act, it guarantees a hearing for juveniles to petition for a sentence reduction, but it's also, I want to say, like, tendencies in it where as though you can't go back and front your sentencing judge. So when you say teeth, that's the same stipulation that emerging adult needs. Because if you're looking at what I've done while incarcerated, and not the act itself that got me here, but who I am today, my character today, what can I bring to the community that I'm returning to? It's hard to do so if I'm going back in front of a sentencing judge. So when you come across things, you have to understand the legislation you're reading, but you have to also know who your resources are. We have to be each other's resources. We have to be willing to share. We have to be willing to ask questions. We have to be willing to really grind it out with the person next to me, even if that bill doesn't affect me. Because that's how agency works. And that's our number one tool that we have. So, any questions, I guess?
Yeah.
Thank you both. I was not sure whether that was the last slide, but thank you guys both so much. I'm gonna come and join you in a second, if I can remember how to do it.
Oh, it's fine. Great.
Okay. Well, thank you. I see that there's a lot of questions in the chat, but I just wanted to ask my question first, which was just to go back, because when you first introduced post-incarceration transition syndrome, Janet said, well, he said males, but, and so I'm sorry, because you kind of were like, next slide anyway. So I just have to say, Jay, do you have any response for that? Because that feels like an important question.
I try to let Twin handle it since he started the war. So when I seen his thesis and it discussed pits, right? I'm like, you wouldn't be you without me. I'm confused. Women tend to be on a back burner, but after I had my discussion, he explained that the researcher like wanted to speak from a place of experience. He's a male, so he didn't want to speak for females. So I'm going to speak for females. We actually are conditioned and groomed the same way that men are to be less than. And we're going to get to that. That's a later date for research and stuff. But yeah, the same way y'all was looking is the same way I was looking, a male. Okay. But yeah.
I had to highlight that. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for clarifying that. And I look
Mhm.
forward to hearing about more research about it. So you both, you in your talk, you talked about reentry and mentioned that it it really happens and starts as soon as someone comes in through the doors of a facility. And so what are some of the reentry successes that you know about, that you've learned about, or that you've seen implemented in your experience?
So I can speak to that. And it was a guy that came in, and we actually have a youth challenge program. And when he came in, we grabbed him immediately when he come in. It's like a policy that we have that every young man that comes here that's under 20 gotta come down there. Don't matter where we at in the cycle and so forth. They gotta come hang out with us. And from that, we begin to build the necessary relationships. And so from building those relationships, as we begin to see him throughout the rest of the institution, it's like, yeah, what's up? What you doing? What you do today? Like we showing up at school for him and so forth, and turning into that big brother. It was one guy who came here from a program uptown. When he got here, we stayed on his line all the time. He wound up getting his GED, and as soon as he got his GED, he had enough time that gave him them extra 40 days to push him back into the street. And then once he went home, he actually joined the religious community and he kept pushing forward. So prison was off the table for him after like his experiences.
So can I add to the reentry experience? So on our end, right? I've been here almost 20 years. I've watched the inclusivity be stripped from us. So if you had a lot of time, you wasn't within 3 years of your release, then you couldn't do certain programs. I do not know when Miss Talon Twyman joined VPSCS, but that lady came in kicking. Like, listen, no, reentry starts at the door. You're a lifer, you want to come? Come on. I don't got no problem with that. You never know when a person is going to leave. And I really appreciate her energy, her attitude, because she invests so much into people, no matter what amount of time you have, that it helps you want to rehabilitate yourself. And that's all that we want to say. Like, you have to invest in the person to strengthen that person and invest in themselves. So,
Do you
yeah.
feel like there's equal resources for reentry for men and for women, or do you feel like it's different?
Are you asking me or Jack?
I'm asking you first, but I'll let Jay chime in.
All right. So I feel like there's room for improvement, right? As I've said, Miss Talon brings a lot to the table. And you have other organizations like PG County. PG County is awesome. They have a lot of resources. If I'm not mistaken, Ivan Bates, our state's attorney in Baltimore City, is collaborating with PG County to adapt some of their practices, I think. But their resources for women are top notch. But it's like depending upon your jurisdiction sometimes. That's why I really like hype up what Ms. Talon is doing, what our administration is doing, because right now they're pushing. We have a warden here, Warden Parker, and she's open to making sure that we're okay. Like, is what do we need? What does that look like? If she doesn't know the answer, she will point you to the person. Anything that we've asked for that I've seen within the last year of dealing with Miss Talon, I'm in her trauma and healing class. We get it. If we have any questions, she goes straight to the warden and handle it with no problem. So there's still a gap. We're starting to get houses that's geared towards us. more houses that have trauma and not just addiction based situations. We're getting more houses that allow for you to bring your kids. When it comes to reentry, where I just like the inclusivity of the entire population. So it needs more work, but I see the vision.
Did you want to add to that, Jay?
No, I think she did a good job, and I was going to echo the same thing, that I think that the resources for women are lagging behind and starting to catch up. And there's a lot of good people that I know on the front lines that's pushing the narrative so that they can catch up.
But they can't catch up if we don't pitch in. Because again, we know what we need. And right now, with the platform that you guys are giving us, the platform that we're creating on our own as well, we're able to articulate that. So, yeah.
So I want to read from this question. It says, live from MCIJ in the trenches, I heard them talking about pits and how it starts before incarceration. What's the most effective way to change your identity within that environment?
Oh, let's go. You got it?
So I think that within that environment before incarceration, it's like you got to change your vibration. You got to change the things that has become a norm to you, right? Because again, when we talking about the grooming process, we talking about daily experiencing the same things and coming to the same conclusions. So unless you got something to challenge your conclusions within that space, you're not going to change it. Now, once you're incarcerated, it's about educating yourself. It's about educating yourself and beginning to deal with the traumas, because we got to remember that a lot of our responses is trauma based, right? Meaning that when you have an argument with a dude, the first thing you want to do is go upside their head. That's a trauma based response, right? Not a rational response from a rational thinking person or mind, right? And it happens that way because we've been groomed that this is the way to deal with conflict. And so as we deal with conflict, again, if we still in that space and thinking from that mind, that tend to be what we go with. So what I would always suggest is beginning to take yourself through some type of therapeutic measures, right? From AVP, Youth Challenge, we have Breaking the Cycle of Criminality, Youth Journey, going to whatever your spiritual system is and looking at the values that founded it so that you can begin to push your decision making to a different space.
But I'm gonna jump in and add on too, because I know you guys are at NCIJ. NCIJ is about to launch our first Trauma Talks cohort. Trauma Talks is actually on your tablet, and it might seem a little off-putting because it's not in person, but it works. You gotta go find some tools that you could come across and adapt and make them your own. And in addition to like different groups that's trauma based, we've really got to bring back attention to breaking generational trauma curses, because a lot of the trauma we have is literally generational. So if you work on breaking your own trauma cycle as a family individually, it'll help you when you get in these places. Like I don't want to be like that. I want to be able to think things through. I want to think before I react. It sounds easy. It's not. It's really not. So, but
I have to take us on a little side road for a second here, because the way you started this presentation was so fire, saying that we're the twins. And so I just have to ask, like, where did that come from? What's the genesis of the twins?
what's up? How somehow you popped up everywhere I was. Like, what's up?
She my stalker, right? So she began to stalk me in different ways, right? And she named herself after me. And so by naming herself after me, one of the things that we found was we've migrated together on so many different wavelengths. Even when you look at our senior thesis, we started them at the same time, and the topics that we picked were so complementary. Our thinking pattern was so complementary, looking at the issues that deal with us. It was like, man, there wasn't no other way to go about it.
No. That's like feeling little bug rats, right? So like I don't know, it's like we was requesting stuff for school one time, right? And they was like, one of y'all gotta go by your government name. I was like so excited, like ain't no way he gonna beat me. And then they like, oh, his first name is Jay. And I'm like, whatever. But everything turned into a competition between Jay and I. Who's gonna finish that thesis first? Who's gonna do this? Like even down to this presentation. I know you graduated first. I got thesis first. I got it at 6 o'clock. Sorry, you got yours at 7. But it's like everything we find out about each other, it just lines up. The same ambitions, the same passion, and we really move from a place of servitude. So yeah, that's my time. Yep.
I love it. Thanks so much. I'm sorry. Thanks for indulging me. I'm glad you both brought up your theses because my next question is about that. So both of your theses talk about and seem to think about systemic transformation. And I'm wondering how would it look like if the ideas that you bring up in this presentation really inform the design of some kind of emerging adulthood approach?
Can I go first one?
Of course you can go
So
first.
I definitely a few months ago I had this conversation with Deputy Secretary Annie Harvey. It's something that as our state, we know we want to move forward, like with the consideration of creating some type of unit, some type of program geared towards emerging adults, because there aren't enough resources at the moment. I think it would be really, really great if I had some of the resources that I read about, some of the things I found out later in life. I could have been on this journey of like transformation. It took me a very long time to figure it out on my own. Like I've been like the almost 20 years. I'm only 13 years infraction free. Like it was hard. It was hard. So I think that would really help uh recidivism. I think it would help the state of institutions, because when you bring resources for one group, you share them amongst each group, each different type of population. So yeah.
Yeah, some of what she was saying, I think it will begin to change actual incarceration, right? Because one of the things it'll begin to do is it'll begin to put the rehabilitative practice back into incarceration. So you begin to change outcomes. And in changing outcomes, you'll have incarcerated community members returning back to their communities, wanting to build up their communities, wanting to build up these spaces because they begin to recognize what happened to them in these spaces and not wanting it to happen to somebody else. So they'll begin to invest in it, right? They begin to put their own effort into really building up these spaces to stop a flow of children from coming in, the juveniles, the other emerging adults. And then while they here, they begin to build up themselves in the possibility of not returning. And so that in and of itself would impact recidivism. Because I think even when we look at it, you say education impacts recidivism. We say rehabilitation impacts recidivism. So knowing these things going in, if we make this like a prime move and a prime focus, then we begin to change outcomes that begin to change more outcomes that then begin to impact the system in such a way, the way as though we won't have in a society what we have now. Even if you start looking overseas at how Sweden and them do prison, they do incarceration different. And with them doing incarceration different, their outcomes of incarceration is different, right? Because you got to remember that 90% of the people that's coming to prison is going home one day. So what type of incarcerated community member do you want back in the society? Like, what do you want that person to focus on? What do you want that person to do if you don't begin to invest in them?
Yeah, so this question came for Janet, but I'll ask it of both of you. What about policy? What about changing policy? Are there policies that you would like to see changed?
If I do not say this, my friend gets me. Shout out to everybody that's thinking about gender specific policy, because we are in an institution where most of our policy and our rules are for the men. I think that's really big. I think that it's going to take people like Twin, my other alumni that's here with me now. It's going to take us to push the issue on certain things. We have politicians that want to change certain policies. They come in on tours. We talk to them all the time. But we also need to do our part as well. And we're doing it. We're coming.
You want to add anything, Jay?
No, I think she did a good job. I'm gonna leave that to her.
I also have to just comment. You guys were so nice to me in advancing the slides. I was like, please boss me. And they were like, please. I was like, just tell me to switch the slides. That's so nice. Here comes another question. I am a mom of one of the students in the GPEP. How do you all think that education in prison specifically helps young adults prepare for life after release?
So from personal experience, I say this. One of the things that happened, it's two other GPEP alum that actually, like, one of my aspirations in the beginning was like, look, man, I'm gonna just go home and drive trucks. No, I can make a living for myself. It could actually help me stay out of the way and so forth. But they wouldn't accept it for me, right? They refused to let me stay in that space, recognizing what I had, recognizing everything I had, everything else I had to give and stuff. So they forced me to stand up and move to a higher calling, right? And full acknowledgement, without Ramika and Will, I kind of wouldn't have done as much as I've done in the way that I've done it, right? And they forced me to really start looking at the abilities that I have and then how I apply them to benefit the next generations. Because again, it was like, man, I'm gonna go in my own lane and help where I can help or where I choose to help at, as opposed to really making a lane and then pulling people along with me. So I think that education and GPEP changes outcomes. It changes perspectives and it shows you exactly what's possible, because you get a chance to really look at other examples of what they did with their lives from a historical context and a current context, because you run into so many great scholars, right? And these extraordinary scholars force you to stand up and match them.
They did, and as Jay mentioned, Ramika and Will. So when I came in, Ramika was already established. She was a shop worker. She wasn't getting in any trouble, and I did not want to go to Goucher. She dragged me kicking and screaming. I am an alumni today. I graduated with honors. So like the way that she invested in me, when I started to see our resource lacking, like COVID, the stripped us of a lot of programs. So what do? Do I complain or do I step in and try to create programming myself? So then I started mentoring. The same way Ramika did me is the same way I did a few of the other GPEP students. The same way is one of our peers. She's a new alumni. She actually did her thesis on gender specific policy, and to see the switch click for her, like, what you need me to do? What we going to do? Oh, we got to go get them, because maybe they go to school, they'll like calm down a little bit. They'll be able to get in a pocket. They just need to be around us. So we're allowed to go to like the administration and be like, hey, I think we need this. And then they work with us. And it's because of this platform. It's because of GPEP, because they see our growth within the program and how we're affecting other people. So it's valuable.
Yeah, shout out to Ramika. I know she's in the audience. I see her name. And also shout out to Danielle Cox. I see that she left you a little message in the Q&A, and you can read that in a bit. Another question is a member of the audience is asking you both to share what most shaped your perspective on the emerging adulthood stage of life and its challenges.
For me, like living it, right? Like living it, beginning to understand it and look around me, because I've been locked up for 22 years and I'm only 40. And so looking around, you looking at so many people that I started this journey with still here and in different phases in their life, right? And with them being in different phases in their life, one of the things I started to recognize was like, man, as we got further to our incarcerations, we started making different decisions. And those different decisions was pushing us on different paths. And those different paths had their own outcomes. So I got a real close homeboy of mine that we started this bit together. We ran around together in other prisons, and it's like now, when I look at it, like he's suffering from a lot of the symptoms that I found within PICS and PITS, right? Like I seen it on a daily basis, and sitting with him, trying to like build him up and trying to get him over the hump. It was so hard because I remember who he was, right? And so trying to pull him with me, it's like, man, we spent the large portion of our lives here, and spending a large portion of our lives here, we looking at the damage that it has, right? But then also recognizing that it's been people that came through that same door with us, that spent that same time here, then that was able to move to another environment, another space, go home, and then be successful and still reach back and provide a way, right? Provide some insight on like the transition phase and stuff like that. And so for me, it was like that, like just having lived experience and being able to step back off the battlefield and recognize the polarity of what I was seeing, and then making choices of which way I wanted to go and which way I wanted to move.
Yeah, and for me, I think this drive when it comes to emerging adulthood and really understanding what that means came from just being disappointed one too many times. When the Juvenile Restoration Act passed in Maryland, I didn't fit the bill. It said you had to be under 18. And some of the people that put the bill together and took it to Capitol Hill actually was coming into our lifers meeting, and I was talking to them. They knew some things I was going with in Goucher. They went back and tried to advocate on my behalf, like, can we do a clause or can we do a window for like if you're 18? And it was a no. And then when I learned the term, I just took off running. Like, what do I do? Do I cry? Do I get disappointed? I was 18. My brain didn't change overnight. Is not even developed. If you're using that science, how can you exclude me if the science says I'm not, my brain isn't fully developed into 24? I should be included. So then I just said I'm gonna make them include me. I'm not gonna sit by and not evoke change when it's that personal. So that's what I love about this program. We're a liberal arts college. So whatever you want to fight for, when you figure out what you're fighting for, what's important to you, we rally behind each other and really support the cause. So
It's amazing. Another question is asking whether, I guess it's a two-part question. How has education shaped your life trajectory? And what do you see yourselves doing from here?
you want to tell them you're gonna work for me? You go ahead, knock it out.
So for myself, it like I said, like I was saying earlier, it actually changed where I'm going at, right? And that actually changed the expectations I have in the way that I'm going to engage. And writing my senior thesis, at the end of it, I actually found in my personal perspective that the therapeutic models that I looked at left a lot on the table, right? And so for me, I'm building my own therapeutic model to begin to deal with and address what I'm finding. But I'm using it from an and or perspective, a both and perspective, as opposed to an either or perspective. A both and perspective means that I'm going to take from other models that I found, different things that I found that works, different things that I found that's relevant, and include them in it, right? Because I recognize inclusivity, right? And that everything that we do moving forward has to include the majority of us, because we are the only people on the front lines for us. Other people are channeling, other people are helping, which we're thankful for, right? But we the ones closest to the issues, closest to the problem, so that we the ones that gotta solve them. So looking at that, for me, education has changed my trajectory, has actually given me the necessary tools to pull off what I want to pull off and to build what I know that need to exist in order for us to move forward.
So for me, I really, really love creating programming, right? So I want to get my PhD in higher education administration. I have a few things that actually went well. I have something that I'm working on in the moment. I just want to change what higher education look like in facilities like this. What are the opportunities that we can bring to incarcerated communities across the U.S.? And I am looking forward to working with DPSCS upon my release, and continue to work with them from ahead. But I want to go state to state. I want to make sure that whatever we implement on this end is receptive nationwide. So that's really my goal. I have a brand that I'm, working on as well. That's it. So people are going to see me coming. I'm coming. I'm all about collaborating, and I look forward to building stronger programs.
I love it. I love the expression, people are going to see me coming.
Yeah, I'm coming. Sorry. Just giving you a warning.
Great. I want to thank you both for this presentation. It was really wonderful hearing from both of you, and your whole dynamic is so lovely. It's really a lot of fun to learn kind of hard things from the two of you in this way. So thank you guys so much. And for all the attendees of the session, I want to thank you as well for showing up, for Incarcerated Scholars, for showing up for this conference, for showing up and supporting the Alliance. It really is incredible, this community that we have.